Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom's June release is now available, and this is such a fun release. As you can see from the picture, this is a Western theme release. So let me show you everything that's included. And if you are interested in any of the products, I do have links provided in the description box below. The first item is a stamp set called Farm Sweet Farm. This is currently not available for individual purchase. For a limited time, this is the freebie you will receive if you purchase at least $50 over the weekend, and your order must include at least one item from the new release. The next item is the Cowboy add-ons for the Gnome Dies. Look how fun this is. You'll get 2 new hats and also a pair of cowboy boots. Plus there are also 2 new mustaches. This is such a fun set. I love the Gnome Dies. Next up, we have a sentiment set called Howdy Gnomie. There's the stamps and also the coordinating outline dies. And the sentiments are so much fun. Perfect to go along with the new Cowboy add-on Gnome Dies. The next stamp set is called Udderly Fantastic. We have the large image of a cow with all the flowers on its head and lots of great sentiments. And there is a coordinating outline die for that cow image. And I love that it also includes a Christmas sentiment. Merry Christmas and a Happy Moo Year. Isn't that fun? The sentiments on this set also work nicely with other items in the release. Next up, we have 2 new die sets. We have the Farm Scenic dies and also the Farm Fence dies. The Scenic dies are so fun. There's a chicken, the rooster, the big hay bale, and also some wheat. And the fence die has the 4 posts individually, so you could add those on top, and all of the dies have that great stitch detail. I used both of the sets multiple times on my cards in this video. The final item in the release is the Octagon dies, the Farm add-on set. Look at all the pieces included. You'll be able to create a barn, a chicken, a cow, a sheep, a horse, so many different farm critters. So here's a look at all of the pieces. I haven't cut them apart yet. Now, if you haven't seen the Octagon dies, you will need the original Octagon treat box set, and this is what it looks like. They're the 3 pieces, so you can create your little box. But you can also add the images onto a card. They don't have to be on a box. Here's an Octagon box I made several months ago using, I believe, one of the Christmas add-ons. And all of the pieces to create this sweet little deer. I will be doing a separate video using the farm add-ons, since this video is already about 30 minutes long. Before I get started on my cards, I wanted to show my little gnome organizer again. I cut out all of the hands, the face, the nose, the feet, and the silhouettes of the body using different skin tone papers. And I have them all stored in this box, so it's super fast to create a gnome. And then I do have a second container with the beards, all the different hairstyles. I have the original mustache, and I will be cutting out more of the new mustaches that are included on the Cowboy set. And I do have some extra skirts, some hats, and some of the wings. I've purchased a couple more containers like this so I can prep other gnome pieces. And if you are interested in this container, I will add a link in the description box below. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I'm using a card sketch from Sugar Pea Designs. This is Sugar Sketch number 51. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches I show in this video, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. That link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. All of the pattern paper I'm using in this video is from Echo Park's brand new Fun on the Farm release. This is perfect to go along with Jaded Blossom's Cowboy release. For the background of my card, I have some craft cardstock. I use a stitch die from Concord & Ninth for that fun diagonal detail. I'll add my pattern paper panel to the front. I did round the top and bottom corner on the left side. I layered the pattern paper on some green cardstock, and I'll layer this background piece on that same green cardstock. Now it does have a pearlescent finish on the other side, but I felt the shade of green with that pearlescent didn't match as nicely with the pattern paper, so I used the solid side instead. For a little bit of separation and contrast between the two pattern paper pieces, I am adding a Love from Lizi peel off, and this is the gold moon dust color in the pinstripe style. Next I'll be adding the fence die cut to my card. And as you can see, it's too wide for an A2 size card, but that's not a problem. I'm just going to trim it down, and there will be a gap between the two pieces, but I'll be covering that up. So I'll glue down the right side first. I'm putting an acrylic block on top for that added weight while the glue adheres. And now I'll add the other piece. I made sure to cut that center piece out so I could have the very ends of the fence. Now I'll be adding one of the cowboy gnomes. This cowboy hat is so fun. I did put some foam dimension on the back of the gnome. I'll remove the release paper and adhere him right in front of the fence, covering up that gap. There are several different items you can have your gnome hold. I decided he would hold the sentiment Howdy. I cut out that background from some white shimmer cardstock and all of the letters using the same green cardstock. And I'll just adhere those in place using some liquid adhesive. There are some fairly small die pieces in the new sets, so it does help to have a pair of reverse tweezers. The letters are very easy to line up on that background. I will be popping up the sentiment, so I'll put some foam dimension on the back side. Then I can add the hands on the very outer side of the sentiment. I love how Jaded Blossom designed the gnomes to hold something, and I love that the newer sets are now including sentiments. I'm using liquid adhesive to attach the two hands. Now I'll add the banner in the upper left-hand corner, and I love this sketch since it has this really interesting banner. Now I just cut it myself since I don't have any dies that are in that banner shape. I'll glue that in place using some liquid adhesive. And I decided to add a little bit of bling. This is some old honeybee stamp gem stickers that I have on hand. Then a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights to my cowboy. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this design. I was never a gnome fan until Jaded Blossom came out with their Gnome Dies. Now they have so many add-on sets, I just want to keep making gnome cards. Now moving on to card design number 2. I won't be using a card sketch, instead I'll be creating a little scene. I used 2 different pattern papers. I love that the paper collection includes the sky and also some grass pattern paper so you can create a little scene. I used a grass die from Jaded Blossom's mushroom die set for this fun hillside. Once I have my background assembled, I can start adding some of the die cut images. I have 3 stalks of wheat and also 2 hay bales. For the hay bales, I used some brown cardstock for the ties that hold that hay all together. Most of the wheat stalks won't be visible on my card, so I did trim off the very bottom. I wanted to add a little more color to the wheat stalks, so I'm using the Sauna ink color by Catherine Pooler. I have a small blender brush. This is from Waffle Flower. I'm just adding that little bit of ink to the edge of all of the wheat pieces. The white mat I'm using is also by Waffle Flower. It's their mini stencil mat. It's amazing and it cleans up beautifully. I just used a baby wipe and all of that ink color is gone. So first I'll add my wheat stalks. They'll be on the very left-hand side of the card. I am putting some foam dimension on the very top of each of the stalks. And on the very, very top, I did have to cut a teeny tiny piece of foam dimension. I'll remove the release paper and put liquid adhesive on the bottom portion of the stalks. Then I can add those to my card in the upper left-hand corner. There are 2 different dies of the wheat stalks. One leans slightly to the right and the other leans slightly to the left. So I did alternate the 2 different dies. Next, I'll attach one of the hay bales, and the second one will go in front, overlapping. I'll put my acrylic block while I let that glue adhere, and for the second hay bale, I will be popping it up using some foam dimension. Remove the release paper and adhere it in front of the other hay bale. I made sure to leave enough space on the right side of the hay bale so I could add my little cowgirl Gnomie. I'll also be adding a few of the chickens. I have 1 rooster and 2 of the hens. You'll need several different die cut pieces to assemble the chicken. So I have the very background cut out of an orange cardstock, and instead of adding some black cardstock behind this white piece for the eye, I just used a Sharpie and colored it on that very background orange piece. And again, add all the other tiny pieces for the chicken. Now there's also a separate piece for the beak and the legs, but since I cut that background piece from orange cardstock, I didn't need to use those. Now I'll assemble my little cowgirl Gnomie. I have the very background silhouette body cut out from some white cardstock, and you won't see any of that at all. It's really just a base to add the rest of your pieces. I used some of the blue pattern paper for her dress. For most of the skin tones of my gnomes, I use a collection from P13. It's called Skin Tones. It's a 4x6 paper collection. Since that background silhouette piece has the traditional gnome hat, I did need to trim the very top off so I could attach my cowgirl hat. And of course, this girl has pink braids, a pink cowgirl hat, and pink cowgirl boots. I used some pink glitter cardstock for the bows and also the band on the cowgirl hat. There are several die cut pieces for the gnomes, but they're so easy to assemble. And with all the different add-on sets available, the possibilities are endless. I've seen some amazing cards by the Jaded Blossom design team. So there is my little cowgirl. I decided she'll be holding one of the hens. I'm putting some foam dimension on the back side. The hen and the rooster are the perfect size for the gnomes to hold. So now I can attach her hands. I'll put just a little piece of foam dimension on the back side of the hand. Then I'll remove the release paper, add some liquid adhesive. And on that one piece of foam dimension, the release paper did not want to come off. It was very stubborn. Then I'll just put one of her hands on both sides of the chicken so she's holding it. The gnomes always look odd to me until I add the item they're holding and their hands. Now I'll add foam dimension on the back of my little cowgirl. I'll only add foam dimension on the right side since the left side of her will be sitting in front of that hay bale. Before removing the release paper on the foam dimension, I'm holding my gnome onto the card, feeling around to see if I need to add any other foam dimension. Then I'll remove the release paper, add liquid adhesive on the other areas, and attach my little cowgirl in front of the hay bales. Once I have her in place, I realized I need a little bit of foam dimension on the very left side of her hat. So I'll just tuck that underneath. Now I can add the rooster and one of the hens, and they'll be sitting in the lower left-hand corner. I'll add just that little bit of foam dimension where the chickens are going off of the hay bale. So for the rooster, I just need foam dimension on the very lower portion of his body. Remove the release paper and add liquid adhesive. And part of his tail is going to sit in front of her cowboy boot. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. This is Howdy Gnomie, and I'll adhere that in the upper right-hand corner, and I did put foam dimension on the back side. To finish up the card, I'll add some of the highlights using a white gel pen. So there's my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. I love how this turned out. It's such a fun little Western scene, and the chickens are absolutely adorable. Now moving on to card design number 3. The card sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 229. I selected 3 different pattern papers. I have the wood grain for the background. For that narrow strip, I used some of the bandana paisley design. And for the small squares, I decided to go with the cow print. I'm layering the 3 small squares on some black cardstock, and I'll also be layering that background wood panel on some black cardstock. Instead of layering that narrow strip with cardstock, I'll be using some Love from Lizi peel-offs. This is the black color in the pinstripe style. I'm using the narrowest width and putting one along the very edge. Now on the left side, I don't need a full piece since part of it will be covered up with the squares and some of the image die cut pieces. I'll put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but all of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. For my cardstock layers, I generally add an additional 1/8 of an inch to the measurements listed on the card sketch. For example, the pattern paper squares are 1 1/2 inches, and those are the measurements I have on the sketch. For the black cardstock matted layer, those I cut to 1 5/8 of an inch. I use liquid adhesive to adhere all 3 of the squares in place. Now I'll be adding a couple of die cut images. I love the wheat stalk, so I decided to add 2 of them on the very left side of the card. I did pop up the very top portion of the wheat stalks and then put liquid adhesive on the bottom. I'll also be adding a cowboy hat. So I have the main hat cut out of dark brown cardstock and then used a light tan piece for that band around the hat. I will be popping it up using some foam dimension. Now before adhering the hat in place, I'll add the sentiment. This is "You are utterly fantastic." I think that works perfectly with the cow print pattern paper. I cut a fishtail on the right side of the sentiment. Before adhering it to my card, I will put a scrap cardstock piece on the very right side where it goes off of that cow paper, and that'll just help keep it nice and level. Then I'll remove the release paper on the foam dimension and adhere my cowboy hat on the left side of the sentiment. Try to place it so it wouldn't cover up any of the words. For final finishing touch, I'm using some mini circle peel-offs from Love from Lizi. This is the black color. I put 3 of them along the side of that top square. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 4, I'm using Jaded Blossom's Triangle Card Matte Die. This is a very popular die. I've seen many cards from Jaded Blossom's design team using this. I cut out the frame from some teal cardstock, and I'm adding it onto the same teal cardstock color, just cut 1/8 of an inch bigger than the frame. The frame is fairly narrow, so I find it easiest to adhere using liquid adhesive. Put some ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Now I can add all of the triangles. For my card, I'm using more of the teal cardstock and also this beautiful daisy pattern paper. Now you could add a variety of different pattern papers to the background. I've done that before, but I decided for this card to just focus on the one pattern paper and then some solid cardstock. One thing that's nice about the die, there are only 2 different sizes of the triangles. So you can mix and match those 4 pieces. You don't have to keep track of which piece was cut out of which area. I'll be adding a stitched oval die cut, and I use some white shimmer cardstock for that. I'll adhere it to my card on the right side, and this is where my little gnome will be sitting. Here's my little cowgirl all assembled. I love the cowgirl hat, so I am using it quite a bit in this video. I have some foam dimension on the back side of her. I'll remove the release paper and adhere her to the center of the oval. Now this little girl will be holding the lasso. This is so fun. I like that the die cut piece has the areas where to place the hands. Otherwise it's a little confusing how to have the cowboy or cowgirl hold that lasso. I did put 1 small piece of foam dimension on that top knot of the lasso, but for the rest of it, I put liquid adhesive. So once I have that in place, I can attach her hands. And I'm just using liquid adhesive for those. Isn't that cute? I love how they can hold the lasso. For this sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. This is Yeehaw Gnomies. Using the same outline die, I cut out a second piece from gold pearlescent cardstock, glued those 2 pieces together, offsetting them slightly so you could see just a peek of that gold pearlescent cardstock underneath the sentiment. And I did pop it up using some foam dimension. For embellishments on my card, I'm adding some gold glitter mini star peel-offs. Put just a few of them around my little cowgirl. And I'm also adding a small gold bow on the brim of her hat. For final finishing touch, I'll use my white gel pen, add those few highlights to my little gnome girl, and I'm also adding a fun pattern on her little green dress. So there is my finished card. I made two using the cowgirl, and I made two similar cards featuring the cowboy, and he has the sheriff badge on his hat. For the two cowboy cards, I also used the pattern paper frame of that triangle card matte die. I didn't want it to go to waste. Although now that I see the finished card, I probably should have used the pattern paper frame for the girl cards, but that's okay. For card design number 5, the card sketch is from OWH. This is number 176. I love how you can feature several different pattern papers using this sketch. For the largest piece, I used the fun farm paper with all the different icons. Then I have some blue tone on tone. For that narrow strip, I used the wood grain. On the very top piece, I have the red and white gingham. I layered all of these on some black cardstock, and I did have to adjust the measurements that are on that sketch in order to have my cardstock layers. Between each of those pattern paper strips, I will be adding a Love from Lizi peel-off. This is the silver holographic color in the pinstripe style. I'm using the narrowest width. I don't need a full peel-off strip for those top two areas since it will be covered up by a cardstock banner. For the last peel-off that goes underneath the blue pattern paper, I'm using a craft knife to trim the very right side. So now I'll put ATG tape on the back and layer this piece on some red cardstock. Then I'll put my card front onto a card base, and for this card I won't have any of the white card base showing. Now I'll cut a fishtail on the left side of the red cardstock piece, adhere that in place using some liquid adhesive. And for this sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. This is Farm Sweet Farm. And this sentiment is included on the freebie stamp set. I am popping up the circle using some foam dimension. For final finishing touch, I'll add some mini heart peel-offs in the red mirror color. Just put two of them next to the sentiment on the right side. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this design. This is a great design for featuring lots of fun pattern papers and a sentiment, or you could add a small image in that little circle. Now moving on to card design number 6. I'll be using the large chevron die from Jaded Blossom's border die set. I used 5 different pattern papers for these fun borders. For the background, I have some craft cardstock, and I added some white watercolor splatter. Now I'll attach all 5 of my chevron die cut pieces. This is another great way to feature several different pattern papers. I'm adhering the die cut pieces in place using liquid adhesive, and I do have the ends going off the edge of the paper. Once I have all 5 attached, I'll flip over that piece and cut off the extra. For the cow pattern paper, the piece was a little smaller, but it was still wide enough to fit on this card. I tried to use some of the scrap pattern paper pieces rather than cut into new sheets. I have just one more chevron piece to adhere. Trying to make sure to line it up nice and straight. Then I'll flip over the panel, use my scissors, and trim off all those extras. I like that they made the border dies long enough so you could feature them either direction on an A2 size card. I'll put some ATG tape on the back and layer this piece on some black cardstock. Then I'll add my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I will be adding a little gnome to the card, but instead of putting it on a white oval, I decided to use some vellum. I didn't want to cover up all that pretty pattern paper. So my little gnome is all assembled. He's wearing the cow hat and holding the little horse. So cute. I attach my gnome to the vellum oval first, then I can flip over that oval and add adhesive just on the back side where the gnome is. That way it won't show through on the front through that vellum. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, Howdy Birthday. I added a blue cardstock layer for that drop shadow, popped up the sentiment using some foam dimension. And for a final finishing touch, I'm adding some gold mini star peel-offs, just putting a few of them around my little gnome. And there is my finished card. Again, I did make 2 using this design. I love that chevron die with the pattern paper for the background. So much fun. Now moving on to card design number 7. And I did not record the process of this card. This is something I ended up making at the last minute, but I love how it turned out, so I wanted to show you. I used the wheat stalks to create a wheat field. Then I have my little cowgirl all dressed in blue sitting in front of the fence. The very background, I did some ink blending. Then I used a Copic marker to add the little dots of dirt or gravel at the very bottom. The sentiment high that she's holding is part of the Girl Gnome die set. Now here's another look at the 15 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's June 2022 release. This is a Western theme release and it's so much fun. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. I love using Jaded Blossom products. The quality is amazing, their customer service is outstanding, and a bonus, their products are made in the US. As I mentioned earlier, I will be doing a separate video using the new Octagon Farm add-on set. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.